What do you make of what happened today? You think it's an odd occurrence, or is this start of something we're going to have to live with for decades?
Yes, and I'll tell you why, and this is where my optimism comes from. These folks, the criminals behind these acts today, know that they are on the losing side of history. I firmly believe that they know this because, again, I'm seeing around me young people who are now, young Muslims who are now having children, writing openly that we are going to be raising our children with the pluralistic values that reformist Islam stands for. When these criminals understand that they're soon going to be outnumbered, when I say soon, I mean perhaps in 2 generations, this is the kind of backlash that they are going to be engaging in. So weirdly, and I realize that this is a hard sell, and time will tell, but I'm making the prediction that what we saw today is not an act of the future. It is an act that bemoans the future. It is an act of backlash against a much more pluralistic and progressive future.
Well, losing sides can be very dangerous. Anyway, thank you, Ayman Mohyeddin and Irshad Manji. I like to hear the way you talk.
Joining me now, Irshad Manji, founder of the Moral Courage Project at New York University. You're someone who, you've been in a situation not completely dissimilar from the folks at Charlie Hebdo in that you have faced threats yourself. You wrote a book called The Trouble with Islam, which was tremendously controversial. What is your reaction to this news and the kind of rush of support we've seen, sort of solidarity from press outlets, not just, I would say, in Europe, but I've seen a lot of cartoonists in Egypt. I saw someone staring on the streets in Syria today with the Je suis Charlie Hebdo. There does seem to have brought out a kind of defense of these values across a whole wide range of different societies.
Cast your mind back to 2006, Chris, during the Prophet Muhammad cartoon crisis coming out of Denmark. Even at that time, almost 10 years ago, I remember receiving emails from young Muslims in various parts of the world saying, you know, I might be offended by the cartoons, but I am even more offended by the violence that is being committed in the name of our faith. Now, that angle didn't get very much coverage, and not surprisingly,
right.
It wasn't
those
sensational.
are emails, and it wasn't a burning Danish flag.
That's exactly right. It wasn't sensational. But I can tell you that over the past 10 years, since then, I receive more of these kinds of messages than of the hate. There is a very clear indicator suggesting that a new generation of Muslims is actually more interested in integration than in cleavage. For example, the rate of intermarriage between Muslims and non-Muslims is high and is on the rise.
In France, you're saying?
In France. Huh. And historically, intermarriage is an indicator of integration and social cohesion.
You also have this issue in France, which I think is important to kind of zero in on here, in which in America we have conversations about race, particularly as related to African-American immigration. That's one vector of our debates. And then we have the kind of war on terror foreign policy. And those are kind of 2 different channels our political debates happen on. They're both intensely important issues, and they get people very passionate. In France, those issues essentially lay atop each other. I mean, to the extent there's a culture war politics about immigration, culture war politics about a, quote, underclass, Muslim on Muslim crime, why are they all in prison, why are they all poor, why are they all on welfare, these kind of tropes you hear here directed at people of color. Right. Those are all there, and then atop this is this other discourse about terrorism.
Well, I would argue that it goes back to this pillar of republicanism, which is really the state ideology of France, a pillar of republicanism called laïcité, right, which is more than just separation of church and state as we would know it here. Right. It is actually a disappearing of religion. It is making religion and faith utterly invisible, so that people don't even have the language with which to speak its name. And that's why so many Muslims, though they are not given, as Chris pointed out, to go to mosque, etc., nonetheless feel systemically excluded from the ability to express all that they are in France. Very big difference in that respect between a democracy like France and a democracy like the United States.
What is the concern, do you think, about the understanding of religion, especially given a lot of the deductions people are making in light of the massacre in Paris?
Mika, I can tell you that there are two main reactions, and they're very much based on different life experiences. One reaction is from non-Muslims who say, Irshad, I thought there was hope for reform in Islam. Clearly there isn't. And what I say to them is, then you're not making an effort to look for where the hope is. Because when good Muslims say and do good things, what we expect Muslims to do, they of course are not going to make news. It's those who engage in sensational acts such as bombings, beheadings, and shootings who make news. And so we wind up having a very lopsided picture of what Muslims are about. And particularly a young generation of Muslims, Mika, I can tell you, you know I've received death threats and hate mail in the past. These days, I can honestly report to you that I receive far more love bombs from young Muslims who are hungry for debate and discussion about what is going on in the name of our faith. They know that their own ability to express themselves as individuals depends on everybody else's ability to do the same.